Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into an incredibly epic, deeply detailed cosmological saga presented in the source text, The Descent of Elohim. We're going to map out a narrative that winds the clock back a staggering 150 million years. It's this wild blend of heavy sci-fi world-building mixed with deep spiritual philosophy. So if you're ready to explore ancient Earth defense forces, interstellar warfare, and the literal origins of cosmic morality, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get into it. Here is how we're breaking this all down today. First up, the ancient chaos setting. Then, Elohim's descent. Third, the sci-fi world building. Fourth, the cosmic war. And finally, the underlying spiritual philosophy. Starting off with Section 1, this setting, ancient chaos. Okay, think about standard archaeology for a second. Mainstream science generally places modern human ancestors somewhere around 30 to 50,000 years ago, right? And the earliest hominid fossils, maybe around 5 million years ago. But this narrative, it asks us to go back way, way further, an incredible 150 million years. This massive timeframe is absolutely crucial because it establishes the sheer, incomprehensible scale of the mythology we're about to unpack. Now picture an absolute physical nightmare. According to the cosmology, this 150 million-year-old Earth was a wildly hostile place. We're talking a planet overrun by giant, hyper-aggressive reptilian species, basically dinosaurs on steroids, and the early progenitors of humanity at this time, the text describes them as resembling demons or ogres, who basically survived by ruthlessly sacrificing each other. You add in highly active volcanoes spewing toxic sulfur gases everywhere, and you have utter chaos. But here's the really important part. Because of all this unruliness and a spike in fearful, unredeemed spirits, this era triggered the initial emergence of a lower spirit realm, essentially the beginnings of hell. And you can actually see this intense environmental setting woven directly into the book's structure. The table of contents explicitly lays out this divine descent onto a 150 million-year-old Earth, making a direct link between the physical chaos on the ground and this massive spiritual crisis of a developing hell. Which brings us to Section 2, the protagonist, Elohim's descent. So who steps into this literal toxic wasteland? Elohim. In this spiritual doctrine, Elohim isn't just some passing visitor. He is one of the core consciousnesses of the earth god, El Cantare, and he descends specifically into the region we now know as the Middle East. His primary mission was huge. He needed to guide humanity away from their chaotic, demon-like survival instincts. He had to give them the wisdom to actually overcome their primal fears, fundamentally teaching them the difference between light and dark, between good and evil. The source text is super clear about this connection, linking Elohim directly back to Cantare. It frames this entire descent as an emergency rescue mission for a planet that was, frankly, spiritually failing. Moving right along to Section 3, Sci-Fi World-Building Survival and Adaptations. This is where the text gets incredibly cool. What elevates this from your standard spiritual narrative is the heavy science fiction world-building. These extraterrestrial beings didn't just rely on good vibes to survive this toxic environment. They wore specialized hazmat gear and spacesuits. They utilized advanced cyborg technology to artificially adapt their physical bodies to the planet's extremes. They literally constructed massive 50 to 100 meter tall pyramid fortresses just to keep those giant beasts out. It paints this incredibly vivid, gritty picture of planetary colonization. Get this. Even Elohim himself is described with these wild, physical, sci-fi attributes. His normal, baseline form is described as being about 3 meters tall. That's almost 10 feet, which is already huge. But the text states that during extreme combat, he could mechanically expand his physical body up to a towering 20-meter giant. And it gets crazier. During these intense battles, Elohim uses something called the third eye on his forehead. But the source describes this way less like a glowing mystical symbol and much more like advanced biological or cybernetic tech. When he opens it, it grants advanced night vision, sensory capabilities, it emits these powerful, destructive ultrasonic waves, and it even has mind control abilities strong enough to manipulate hostile, giant creatures. Reading through these passages, it is abundantly clear we're not dealing with abstract spiritual metaphors here. This is tactical warfare, using biological weaponry and size-shifting combat forms. And trust me, they needed all of it, because this whole narrative centers around a massive cosmic war fought right over the Earth.
That takes us to Section 4, the Cosmic War, Invaders versus Defenders.
So, who exactly is fighting who? The lore sets up the factions very clearly. On one side, you've got the invaders. These are aggressive forces primarily from the Magellan and Centaurus star systems, and their goal was straightforward: the subjugation or total destruction of Earth. Standing in their way are the defenders. This group included native Earth defense forces who were actually backed up by the 3 volunteer armies from places like the Pleiades, who were described as lovers of beauty and harmony, and the Vega civilization.
You can see right in the text that whole sections of the book are dedicated to this space war. It details a full-scale intergalactic planetary defense operation where these highly advanced civilizations actually step in to volunteer their armies. The scale is just massive. It even throws Andromeda genetics into the mix, mentioning that warriors possessing specific traits from the Andromeda galaxy participated heavily in these defense battles. It intricately weaves together all these different galactic lineages, each bringing their own unique tech and combat styles to protect this ancient Earth. And the author really leans into contrasting these groups. You have the Magellan invaders using highly aggressive, destructive tactics, directly clashing with the more harmonious, cooperative, defensive strategies of the volunteer armies. Okay, so we've covered the giant reptilians, the cyborg tech, and the space wars. Now we need to anchor all these sci-fi elements back to the actual philosophy of the text.
Section 5, the spiritual philosophy.
Why did all this warfare even happen? Well, the text posits this overarching spiritual rule. The universe actually naturally permits a certain percentage of destruction, or an idea of evil, to exist. It's a mechanism for trial and growth. But, and this is a huge but, the absolute paramount duty of beings like Elohim is ensuring that the balance of good and evil is protected. That cosmic war was fundamentally about restoring that tipping balance. Elohim basically had to lay down the ethical foundation for a brand new world. He taught primitive humanity the literal distinction between light and dark. By giving them the wisdom to overcome their primal fears, he helps them evolve out of that chaotic survival state into a society with actual moral values. What's more, this ancient war set a permanent precedent. It taught that fighting to protect spiritual values is sometimes absolutely necessary, which introduced the very prototype of self-sacrifice. Okay, and here is where the lore drops a massive twist. The text connects these ancient extraterrestrial battles directly to the much, much later earthly arrival of Jesus. It frames this 150-million-year-old space war and the volunteer aliens who died defending the planet as the spiritual prototype for the concept of martyrdom and self-sacrifice that later defined so much of human history. So, to wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about this. Consider how this unique cosmology takes the massive, imaginative vastness of science fiction, giant aliens, interstellar wars, cyborgs, and uses it to answer the most deeply human questions about morality, the necessity of evil, and the ultimate value of self-sacrifice. It challenges us to view earthly spiritual history not just as a local human event, but as one crucial chapter in a sprawling universal saga. Thanks so much for joining me to break down this fascinating text. See you next time.